In 1989, Andy and Lisa Wyrick thought they had found their dream home, a charming brick ranch house in the peaceful town of Ellerslie, Georgia. Nestled in a quiet neighborhood with a spacious yard, it seemed perfect until they discovered the dark history hidden within its walls. A history that had been abandoned for years, waiting for someone to stir its secrets. For their young daughter, Heidi, the move felt like a fresh start, but with no other children nearby, isolation crept in. Day after day, she played alone, or so her parents believed. One quiet afternoon in March, Heidi was playing outside when she met someone. A kind, elderly man approached her with silver hair, a warm smile, and a dark suit. "Would you like to swing on my swing?" he asked. His name was Mr. Gordy. Excited, Heidi rushed inside, eager to tell her mother about her new friend. She asked if she could go play on the swing with Mr. Gordy, but when Lisa, her mother, heard the name, her blood ran cold. Who was this strange man? And why was he talking to her daughter? Panic surged through Lisa as she darted outside, her heart pounding. But the yard was empty, not a soul in sight. No old man, no Mr. Gordy. Disturbed, Lisa locked the doors, her mind racing with questions. She called her husband, Andy, begging him to come home immediately. Together, they searched the neighborhood, asking everyone if they'd seen the elderly man Heidi had described, a man with silver hair and a dark suit. But no one had seen him. No one even knew of anyone matching that description. Weeks passed, but Heidi continued to mention Mr. Gordy. He was always there, waiting. "Mr. Gordy wants to play," she would say. Her parents, growing more concerned by the day, were torn. Was this old man real? Or just a figment of their daughter's imagination? But as more strange occurrences began to unfold in the house, the Wyricks started to question everything they knew about their new home and the presence that seemed to watch them from the shadows. And who or what was Mr. Gordy? And what did he want with young Heidi? Lisa kept a close watch on her daughter, Heidi. Every day, she grew more uneasy. Heidi insisted her new friend, Mr. Gordy, was real, but Lisa never saw him. Still, the little girl spoke of him constantly. One morning, Heidi told her mother something that sent a chill down Lisa's spine. "Mr. Gordy visited me last night," she said. "He sat on my bed talking to me in the dark." Mr. Gordy wasn't just a passing visitor anymore. He was becoming a part of Heidi's life. Heidi would ask her mother to prepare lunch for Mr. Gordy and carry 2 plates into her room. But the second plate was always left untouched. And during their walks, Lisa would notice Heidi holding her hand out to her side, fingers curled as if she were grasping an unseen hand. "What are you holding, honey?" Lisa would ask, her voice trembling. Heidi's reply was always the same, calm and innocent, "Mr. Gordy's hand." But it was one conversation with Mr. Gordy that left Lisa and Andy more unsettled than ever. "Mr. Gordy says there's money buried in the backyard." Her parents froze. How could Heidi's imaginary friend know about something buried on their property? At first, they brushed it off as childish fantasy. But as more eerie details began to emerge, they couldn't shake the creeping suspicion that there was more to Mr. Gordy than they had ever imagined. Was Mr. Gordy simply a product of Heidi's imagination? Or had something far more sinister taken root in their home? Then one day, something far more disturbing happened. A knock at the door. Heidi answered, her small hand grasping the handle as she pulled it open. A man stood there. His name was Karn. His clothes were drenched, crimson streaks smeared across his body. He said nothing, just stood there, watching her. Heidi rushed to her mother, her voice shaking with fear. "There's a man covered in blood at the door," she cried. Lisa, expecting another mention of Mr. Gordy, was about to brush it off. But something about Heidi's terror made her pause. Lisa ran to the door, but once again, no one was there. The doorway stood empty, the air thick with an unseen presence. Lisa's pulse quickened, dread settling deep in her bones. Desperate for answers, Lisa asked her daughter, "Was it Mr. Gordy?" But Heidi shook her head. "No," she whispered. "It wasn't him. It was someone else." Who is Karn? And what did he want with her daughter? As the days passed, Heidi never mentioned the man in blood again. Can vanished just as mysteriously as he had appeared, leaving Lisa and Andy haunted by the unanswered questions. Were Mr. Gordy and Can connected, or were they two separate entities, each with their own chilling motives? Months went by, and Heidi's bond with Mr. Gordy only grew stronger. To her, he was as real as any friend. But to Lisa and Andy, he was just an unsettling figment of their daughter's imagination. An invisible playmate they couldn't see, couldn't hear, but always felt lingering in the house. But something else had made its presence known. A darker, more oppressive force lurked in the shadows of the house. No longer just Mr. Gordy, this new entity was not friendly. It brought with it a coldness, a weight that hung in the air. The Wyricks had only begun to understand the true darkness that had taken root in their home. Mr. Gordy may have been a friend to Heidi, but whatever else was there had darker intentions. And it wasn't going to leave so easily. As time passed, a darker presence began to make itself known in the Wyrick home. A shadowy figure lurking just beyond sight, hiding in the corners, watching. Heidi could feel it. Its cold gaze followed her every move. It terrified her. The fear became so overwhelming that Heidi refused to sleep in her own room. For 2 long weeks, she huddled between her parents, desperate for comfort, her small body trembling beneath the covers. Even after returning to her own bed, Heidi couldn't bring herself to sleep in the dark. The light remained on, a fragile shield against whatever waited in the shadows. Lisa's concern for Heidi deepened with each passing day. She couldn't understand what was happening to her daughter or how to stop it. Desperate for help, she reached out to her family, hoping for answers. Around this time, Lisa learned that their next-door neighbor had decided to sell their home. Seizing the opportunity, she encouraged her sister Joyce to buy the property and move in. Lisa believed having family close by would help ease her mind and offer the support she needed. But what she didn't realize was that Joyce's arrival would only intensify the mystery surrounding Heidi's imaginary friend, Mr. Gordy. Once Joyce had settled into her new home, she began noticing the unsettling closeness Heidi shared with Mr. Gordy. It was no longer just childlike imagination. Heidi's bond with the invisible figure was disturbingly real. And Joyce could feel it, too. There was something about Mr. Gordy that sent a chill down her spine. Voicing her concerns, Joyce warned Lisa, "There's something wrong about this Mr. Gordy, feels too real." The family, now growing more uneasy, realized that something needed to be done. In an effort to break the strange bond between Heidi and her invisible friend, the family decided to introduce a new companion into her life. A playful dog named Sheba. They hoped that a loyal, living friend might help shift Heidi's attention away from Mr. Gordy. Curiosity has a way of pulling us toward the unknown, and for Joyce, that curiosity led her to a chilling discovery. After moving in next door to her sister, Joyce wanted to learn more about the history of her new home. So she invited the former owner, Mrs. Kelly, over for tea. What started as an innocent visit would soon uncover something far more sinister. Among the old papers, something caught Joyce's eye, a name that sent a shiver down her spine. A signature at the bottom of one of the documents read, "James Gordy." Could it be the same Mr. Gordy that Heidi had been talking to all this time? The imaginary friend that had become so unsettlingly real? James Gordy was a real person. He was a caretaker, but he passed away in 1974. Joyce felt sick. The realization struck hard. Was Heidi's imaginary friend not imaginary at all? Was she, in fact, communicating with the spirit of a man who had died decades before? Wasting no time, Joyce rushed to her sister's house, desperate to share the disturbing revelation. When she told Lisa what she had discovered, disbelief flashed across her sister's face. Could this be true? Could Heidi's Mr. Gordy be the same James Gordy from the documents? Determined to find the truth, Lisa dove into her own investigation. The evidence was undeniable. James Gordy had lived nearby, and he had passed away many years ago. Every clue pointed to the same conclusion: Mr. Gordy had been real, and somehow he had made a connection with Heidi. When Lisa sat down to explain the truth to her daughter, her heart heavy, Heidi simply looked at her with innocent eyes and said, "He's real to me." "He's as real as you are." Still not willing to accept the truth, Lisa decided to take Heidi to Mr. Gordy's grave, hoping to put an end to the mystery once and for all. But what happened next sent a chill down her spine. Without a word, Heidi ran straight to the gravestone. She pointed, her voice clear and steady. "That's Mr. Gordy's grave," she said. Lisa's heart stopped. Heidi, too young to read, had somehow known exactly where James S. Gordy was buried. There it was, the truth carved in stone. James S. Gordy, the man who had been Heidi's closest friend, had died in 1974. How could a child who had never met him know where his grave lay? Just when the Wyrick family thought things couldn't get stranger, the darkness that haunted their home took an even more sinister turn. One night, Sheba, their playful dog, began growling and barking furiously. But at what? Sheba's barking grew more intense, more frantic, as if she could see something no one else could, but nothing was there. Days later, Sheba vanished without a trace. She had run away, driven from the house by something unseen, something dark. The family searched, but Sheba never returned. Whatever had taken hold of their home had claimed its first victim. Desperate for answers, Lisa reached out to Mrs. Kelly, the former owner of the house. She needed to know more about the property. When Mrs. Kelly arrived, she brought with her several old family photos, Heidi being a curious child looking through the pile of photos until she stopped on a familiar face. "That's Con," Heidi said, pointing to the man. "That's the man with the blood on his shirt." "No, that's not Con. That's my Uncle Lon." Mrs. Kelly explained to Heidi. Lon had lost his hand in an accident as a young boy. He had lived on the property for years. Until his death in 1957, Lon, the man Heidi claimed to see, had been dead for decades. The revelation hit hard. Something far beyond their understanding was happening in that house. One evening, as Lisa was drying her hair, Heidi came to her, her voice trembling. "Mom," she asked, "are you sure you won't be scared if I tell you this?" Lisa, her heart now pounding, paused. Heidi continued, "There's a man standing behind you." From that moment on, the uneasy feeling that had been lingering in the Wyrick home turned into something much darker. Until now, the entities had only revealed themselves to Heidi, but soon they would make themselves known to the entire family. One afternoon, Lisa and her niece, Kelly, were arranging flowers for a family wedding when something happened that would shake them to their core. In the middle of the day, with no warning, a chair flew across the kitchen. The violent force of it left both women terrified. They didn't stay in the house a moment longer, fleeing in panic. Days later, Heidi saw the dark figure again. Only this time, it felt more threatening. The oppressive feeling grew so intense that Heidi begged her parents to leave the house. She no longer felt safe, and deep down, neither did her parents. Late one night, when Heidi was asleep, her parents discussed the possibility of moving. Andy, skeptical, wanted to wait and see if things improved. But deep down, even he was beginning to feel the grip of fear tightening around them. The next night, Heidi woke in terror, feeling a sharp burning sensation on her face. She ran to her parents' room, her small voice trembling. "Mom, my face is burning." Lisa turned on the light, her blood running cold, as she saw what looked like claw marks across Heidi's face, 3 deep scratches. It was a warning. The Wyrick family knew they couldn't ignore the signs any longer. That night, they packed their bags and left, seeking refuge with relatives. But as they wrestled with what to do next, the terror was far from over. The following night, Andy was jolted awake by a sharp, stabbing pain in his side. When he lifted his shirt to inspect the damage, his stomach sank. 3 long scratches ran down his side, burning just like Heidi's had. Night after night, the attacks continued. Andy woke with fresh claw marks on his body, his sides, his back, his legs. The scratches ran deep, the pain unbearable. Now, even Andy was convinced they had to leave the house. Despite the mounting fear, Lisa begged the family to stay, but only if they sought help. Desperate for answers, they reached out to a local paranormal researcher and scientist from the university, Dr. William Rowell. Dr. Rowell, a man of science, specialized in debunking paranormal claims. He believed that most hauntings could be explained through environmental factors, magnetic fields, electrical disturbances. Dr. Rowell interviewed the family. Starting with Heidi, he wanted to see if her encounters were based in reality or if they were simply the result of a child's imagination. But what he found was something far more unsettling. To test Heidi's memory, Dr. Rowell conducted an experiment. He handed her a stack of photographs, one of which contained an image of Mr. Gordy. Heidi had never seen a photo of him before, yet when she reached the end of the pile, she stopped. "This is Mr. Gordy," she said, her voice confident. She was right. It was him, Mr. Gordy. Dr. Rowell's skepticism began to crack. How could Heidi have known? He believed Heidi was experiencing something known as place memories, residual energy left behind by people long after they had passed away. Dr. Rowell conducted further tests, scanning the home for environmental triggers. He checked for shifts in magnetic fields, anything that could explain the strange occurrences. But what he found was far more troubling. The energy in the home was unstable, almost as if the house itself was alive. Dr. Rowell measured the temperature throughout the house. Heidi had reported that every time the dark figure appeared, the room would become unbearably cold. Dr. Rowell found that the house maintained a steady temperature of 18 degrees Celsius. But in certain areas, particularly near Heidi's room, there were sudden and dramatic drops in temperature. Then Dr. Rowell made another discovery. His equipment detected unusually high levels of positive ions in the air near Heidi's room. Studies have shown that positive ions can negatively affect a person's mood, perception, and brain function. Dr. Rowell explained that for someone as sensitive as Heidi, these positive ions might be altering her mood and even causing hallucinations. Dr. Rowell reviewed the data collected. In Lisa and Andy's bedroom, the electromagnetic field had spiked to over 40 milligauss when it should have been at a baseline of just 0.1. This confirmed his suspicion that something in the environment was triggering these experiences, assuring them that the strange occurrences were not caused by demons or spirits. Instead, he believed that they were only environmental factors. However, Dr. Rowell was at a loss. Despite his detailed research, there was one thing he couldn't explain: the scratches. Both Heidi and Andy had experienced them, deep, painful marks that looked more like claw marks than anything caused by natural forces. While Dr. Rowell's findings offered some comfort, the hauntings did not stop. The scratches continued, the dark figures still appeared, shadows flitted through the corners of rooms, disembodied voices whispered at night, and the temperature around the fireplace dropped unnaturally cold. Heidi continued to speak of Mr. Gordy's presence, always assuring her parents that he was there to protect her. And the oppressive feeling inside the house remained as strong as ever. After Dr. Rowell's scientific explanation, the Warwick family tried to find comfort in his findings and move forward. They welcomed a new addition to the family, a baby girl named Jordan. Years passed, the hauntings in their home never went away. Heidi, now older, had learned to live with the ghosts, seeing them as part of her daily life. Over time, her childhood friend, Mr. Gordy, faded into memory. But while Mr. Gordy was gone, the shadow figures remained, a faceless shadow man who had followed Heidi for years. Unlike Mr. Gordy, the shadow man was something darker, colder. Heidi never saw his face or his clothes, only the shape of his body. Heidi eventually confided in her best friend, sharing the terrifying encounters she had experienced. One day, as the two sat in Heidi's room, a loud bang echoed through the hall, as if the house itself was coming to life. Both girls froze in fear. Word of the Wyrick family's haunted home spread through the community, attracting attention from the local media. One reporter, after sensing an evil presence at the window, refused to ever return. Heidi, now in school, struggled with the unwanted attention, often feeling isolated and wishing it would all just go away. One afternoon, while Lisa's niece Kelly was visiting, they overheard Jordan talking to someone in the hallway. When Lisa approached her, she was stunned to hear Jordan ask, "Are you one of Heidi's special friends?" When questioned, Jordan told her mother she had been talking to a young girl who died in a car accident. Lisa's heart sank. Was this house cursed, or were the paranormal encounters passed down through the family? Her sister Joyce confirmed her worst fears when she experienced something chilling herself. Late one night, Joyce heard the sound of a young girl laughing in her hallway. As she followed the laughter, a door suddenly slammed shut right in front of her. When she opened it, the room was empty, but the lights flickered on and off, even after she had unplugged the lamps. Back at the Wyricks home, the little girl's ghost wasn't done. Both Heidi and Lisa saw her, a spectral figure wandering through the halls. But for Lisa, the terror grew even darker. She was now haunted by a demonic presence, hearing deep, growling voices in her room, and spending sleepless nights crying in fear. Then, one night, something even more terrifying happened. Heidi awoke in the middle of the night, her room unusually cold and dark. At the foot of her bed, she saw a figure, a shadowy, dark spirit standing silently, its presence heavy and oppressive. Fear gripped her, and she screamed for her parents. But before her voice could carry beyond her room, the dark entity moved with unnatural speed, grabbing Heidi by her ankles. She felt herself being pulled violently from the bed, and in the blink of an eye, the spirit lifted her upside down into the air, holding her by her feet. She flailed, screaming and crying as she dangled helplessly. The dark figure seemed to grow larger, its presence overwhelming as it tightened its grip on her. Heidi's screams echoed through the house, and within moments, Lisa and Andy burst into the room. What they saw stopped them in their tracks. Heidi was suspended midair, her body twisting and kicking as though an invisible force had hold of her. Panicked, Andy rushed forward, shouting Heidi's name, but as he did, the dark spirit released its grip, and Heidi fell to the floor with a thud. Lisa quickly scooped her daughter into her arms, her heart racing. Heidi was crying uncontrollably, her body trembling from the terrifying encounter. That night, they refused to let Heidi sleep alone. She spent the rest of the night in their bed, curled up between them. After over a decade of living in fear, the family turned to their faith, attending a church led by Brother Stephen Shelley. The pastor believed the haunting was the result of demonic forces and encouraged the family to fight back with prayer and faith. Still searching for answers, Lisa and Andy reached out to Dr. Rowell once more. While he remained skeptical of anything demonic, He agreed to investigate again, interviewing the family about their recent experiences. Heidi told him about hearing an old woman laughing in the shower, and Lisa described the two dark voices whispering above her bed. Dr. Rowell began to suspect a genetic link to the paranormal encounters. He believed that both Lisa and Heidi might possess psychic abilities inherited from Lisa's side of the family. To further explore his theory, Dr. Rowell brought in a psychic medium named Amy Adams, who had no prior knowledge of the family or their home. As she walked through the house, Amy sensed a thick wall of energy surrounding the property and encountered several spirits, both benevolent and sinister. Amy described a caretaker spirit, someone protective over the land, but when she entered the house, the energy shifted. She came into contact with a little girl that both Jordan and Heidi had seen, but then she felt something far more menacing, the shadowy figure with no face. Its energy was dark, angry, and dangerous. While Amy validated the family's claims of multiple entities, she also believed that some of these spirits were manipulating their appearances to feed off the family's fear. She warned that the spirits were not demonic, but they were dangerous. Despite Amy's reassurance, Lisa knew that something truly evil was in their home. She consulted another psychic, one who shared her faith, and the moment he entered the house, he detected a demonic presence. In Heidi's room, he felt something dark trying to get in, held back only by a protective spirit. The medium warned that while Mr. Gordy was doing his best to shield Heidi, the portal in the fireplace was growing stronger, allowing more spirits to come through. If they didn't act quickly, the entities would overrun the house. Terrified and desperate, the family turned to their pastor once more. During a church service, Brother Shelley anointed the family with oil, leading the congregation in prayer for protection. For the first time in years, the Wyrick family felt a sense of peace, accepting of their psychic abilities. With renewed faith, the Wyrick family returned home, believing they had finally found the strength to overcome the darkness that had plagued them for so long. For the first time in years, there was a sense of peace. As the years went by, the Wyricks noticed that the paranormal activity had lessened. The dark presence that once filled every corner of their home no longer seemed as threatening. The spirits, though still present, had become part of the background, less frequent and less oppressive. Heidi, now older, had grown used to seeing spirits. The dark, faceless figures that had once terrified her as a child had become part of her world. But something had changed. Heidi no longer saw her abilities as a curse. She accepted her gift for what it was, a sensitivity to the unseen, an ability that connected her to a world most couldn't understand. Heidi now keeps her experiences to herself. The spirits were still there, but she no longer felt the need to speak of them. Lisa and Andy, too, had come to terms with the paranormal activity in their home. It no longer ruled their lives or filled them with dread. Instead, they had come to accept it as part of who they were, a family with unique abilities, connected to a world beyond their understanding. The events that transpired in the Wyrwick home became well known, even drawing attention from Hollywood. In 2002, the TV movie A Haunting in Georgia was loosely based on the family's experiences. Later, in 2013, the film The Haunting in Connecticut 2, Ghosts of Georgia, was also inspired by these same events, further cementing the story as one of the most chilling paranormal cases in modern history. If you found this story haunting, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more eerie tale. Until next time, stay haunted, and thanks for watching.